Finland 1963, but they are only between 2 or 3 countries, not for the whole region. So with 5 countries, that was like almost half of the countries in Southeast Asia when they set up ASEAN. So it had big impact. And the important thing is that it had the biggest country in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, as part of ASEAN. That strengthened ASEAN a lot. Before the formation of ASEAN, it was not impossible because of the conflict between Indonesia and Malaysia. But after Suharto came to power, there was reduced tension between Indonesia and Malaysia. I think during Sukarno, there was a big conflict before that. This was the historic moment when 5 ASEAN countries signed the Bangkok Declaration in August 1967 to set up ASEAN. These are the founding fathers of ASEAN: Adam Marik of Indonesia, Ramos of the Philippines, Thanat Khoman, Thai Foreign Minister, Abdul Razak of Malaysia, and Rajaratnam of Singapore. What is the Bangkok Declaration? Bangkok Declaration set out regional frameworks of cooperation in economic, social, cultural, technical, educational, and other fields. It tried to promote regional peace and stability. This is very important because the idea of having ASEAN is to make sure that ASEAN countries would not wage war with each other. It would not use force with each other. It would create peace in the region. So they talk about peace, freedom, and prosperity. Also, ASEAN signed the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, or TAC, which is the, if you compare it, maybe like Treaty of Rome in Europe. TAC sets out the goals of ASEAN cooperation. They talk about mutual respect for independence, sovereignty, equality, territorial integrity, and national identity of all nations, the rights of state to lead to its national existence free from external interference, subversion, and coercion. This targets the global powers' influence, like communism, for example. Non-interference in the internal affairs of one another. This is very unique of ASEAN. They try to avoid non-interference in each country's affairs. That's why you have never heard of Thailand criticizing Indonesia or Indonesia criticizing Malaysia. No, we try to avoid this kind of difference. We respect each other. Compared to Europe, what happened to Greece? The German government would interfere, would make comments asking Greece to behave, for example, because they're part of the European Union and they have to relinquish some sovereignty to European mechanisms. But in ASEAN, every country still maintains its sovereignty fully. Also, settlement of difference or disputes by peaceful manner. Renunciation of the threat or use of force, and also cooperation among themselves. So you can see all these have political purposes. Non-interference, then dispute by peaceful manner, not to use force or armed forces to each other. Renunciation of threat or use of force, really important. We will not threaten other countries by using our armed forces. This helps small countries a lot, like Singapore. Singapore can live in peace because it will not have to fear of Indonesia or Malaysia, which are much bigger. If we don't have this, then Singapore can be threatened, by neighboring countries. If we compare ASEAN to the European Union, there are some similarities and some differences. As I mentioned, that ASEAN was created at first by political purposes, by the intention to have peace and to avoid war. The EU had similar kind of objective, because you must remember that Europe has a lot of conflicts as well. They just passed 2 world wars in just 1 century. The First World War, 1994 until 1914 to 1918. The Second World War was from 1940 to 1945. So just 4 decades after they had 2 world wars, started in Europe. And at the time, in those both wars, Germany, France, UK, Italy, all big countries in Europe, they fighting with each other. Millions of people died. And if you look long before that, European history is a history of wars and conflicts all the time. The British used to wage war with Spain. Spain used to wage war with Portugal. The French and the British were fighting each other before. Also, the British and the Netherlands also had conflict before. Germany, don't talk about Germany. Germany waged war with many European kingdoms for thousands of years. Don't talk about the Roman period. The Roman period, at the time, they were fighting each other, on a regular basis. So the newfound peace in Europe that we have seen since the Second World War is a new thing. It's been created because of the establishment of the European community. So since the EEC founding, we have never seen wars among the European Union members again. So it proves that the regional cooperation of Europe could prevent war, could establish peace. The whole idea that we form ASEAN is the idea that we would like to have peace, not war. So, but the establishment of the European Union, but before EU it was EC, European Community, was not only political purposes, but also because of economic idea as well. European people, European countries think that if we have common interests, if we have prosperity, if we have a lot of engagements, then we have less incentive to wage war, because we have a lot of interest together to prosper together. So the idea are both political and economic. So these are the detailed objectives: to block military resurgence in Germany, a broader market to develop competitive power to US. One other idea is that if Europe come together, then it could prove to be a global power. After the Second World War, Germany and Great Britain and France lost their prestiges, lost their political power, but US surged as a new world power. It won the war. It proved to be very strong. While European were declining, America was ascending. So European countries think that we should form a coalition, regional cooperation, so that we would become a new power power again. And it proved to be the case because European economy, EU country right now, is larger than the American economy, slightly larger. So they were on par with the American power. But the idea of setting up the European community was not to set up just a loose organization because it wanted to make sure that the regional cooperation would work effectively. So they signed the Treaty of Rome. The Treaty of Rome established common market and they set up mechanisms, working mechanism. And also it created a supranational body. What is a supranational body?
Organization greater than the nation.
Yeah, it means that every country will have to give some power to the regional organization. So the supranational body will have power to bind nation states to conform to its rules and regulations. But this is different because ASEAN doesn't have the supranational body. ASEAN has the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta, which is a main mechanism that moves ASEAN forward. But ASEAN Secretariat doesn't have a power to tell any country to do whatever it needs. It is a coordinator. It's not the government. But in the EU, we have European Commission, which is like European government actually, European Commission, because it can issue directives that bind all European countries. It's like a common law. It has European Parliament. It has European Court of Justice. So it has various mechanisms that European countries have to follow. It has European Central Bank. It's like the Bank of Europe. In Indonesia, you have Bank of Indonesia, which is the central bank, which determine interest rates in Indonesia. It's the same. The EU has European Central Bank, but ASEAN countries, we don't have the ASEAN Central Bank because every country has its own central bank and we don't have to listen to any ASEAN mechanism. So that's why ASEAN's cooperation is much less integrated than European countries. So ASEAN political cooperation started after U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam, and also another thing is U.S.-China reconciliation. When President Nixon visited China, it marked the reconciliation between America and China. Before that, America and China were enemies. But when Nixon shook hands with Mao Zedong, it marked the beginning of the different political landscape of the world. It shook ASEAN countries greatly because ASEAN countries realize now that America chose China rather than ASEAN. America chose to be friends with China, not ASEAN is the second priority. And China supported communist parties in Southeast Asia to overthrow government in Southeast Asia. That's why ASEAN countries have to help themselves. Because they could not rely on America anymore. You see, external power or international diplomacy has changed regional strategy as well. ASEAN set up the SOFAN in 1971. SOFAN is Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality. It was the first time ASEAN made an external joint policy. And they set up the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting, which consists of ASEAN foreign ministers. It was interesting that ASEAN was formed in 1967, but the first ASEAN summit was held in 1976, almost a decade after the formation of ASEAN. You see, so ASEAN cooperation has moved gradually, and it has been strengthened gradually, not very quickly, but gradual, on a gradual basis. And it took ASEAN almost 1 decade to start with regional economic cooperation. From 1967 to 1976, ASEAN hasn't come up with much meaningful economic cooperation schemes. We had a lot of talking, but never implemented big projects in terms of economic cooperation. But only in 1976 that ASEAN began to implement economic cooperation. So during the past 4 decades, ASEAN has progressed a lot. But if you look back, ASEAN is a state-led project driven by the region elites, a top-down policy. Some people said ASEAN is the exclusive club for Southeast Asian foreign ministers because they started from the government, not from the people. It was the government who decided ASEAN, who designed ASEAN, and who determined the ASEAN cooperation schemes, not from the people. It has been just now that ASEAN began to be more inclusive, began to include civil societies into the political mainstream, into the ASEAN mechanism. But before that, it was mainly determined by ASEAN foreign ministers. ASEAN is a tool to advance the political security interests of its member states, but later expanded to include economic and social cultural cooperation. You can notice this clearly because ASEAN set up the ASEAN Economic Community first, and then the political security community and the social cultural community came afterwards. So despite the fact that ASEAN community has 3 pillars, but the economic pillar came first. It was implemented first before the ASEAN community. After that, Indonesia pushed for the political community, and